Hello, everyone. We are on chapter 13 today. We're on to skill number 3. I'm really excited about this part because it has really changed my life to think in those terms. It's a real mind shift about how to look at our relationship and where is my responsibility and where is my husband's responsibility and my kids' responsibility. A lot of times we get so enmeshed in our family, in our like who am I? Who are they? They represent me, and all of these beliefs that don't serve us that we kind of like grow up with. But in reality, I am my own independent person. He is his own independent person, and the children are their own independent people. Sorry, I just ask everyone to mute themselves. It's easier when the recording is replayed. Thank you so much. Um, So that's what this week's lesson is all about. Skill number 3, relinquish control of your man. All control is based in fear. If you're not afraid, you don't need to try to control what your husband says on the phone, what he eats for lunch, or how much money he spends. If you've ever corrected your husband's driving or told him what to wear or when to mow the lawn, you were suffering from the illusion that you could control him. I know this sounds extreme. I once thought so too. But over time, I came to see that knowing where I end and my husband begins and behaving accordingly was absolutely critical to having a great relationship. It improved the rest of my life in big ways too. And I attest to that as well. So she actually gives us homework, which I guess we'll talk about at the end of the class. Remind me, ladies, to talk about that. Okay, chapter 13, stay on your own paper. A true soulmate is a mirror, the person who shows you everything that is holding you back, the person who brings you to your own attention so you can change your life. You know, thinking that I'm going to be happy when my husband behaves this way and that way, and when he does these things and when he says these things, or I'm going to be okay and at peace inside when my kids behave this way, or whoever, my mother-in-law, my coworker, you know, when we kind of depend our happiness on that, we're dependent on others to feel okay inside, and that takes our power away. We're giving our power to them. So she's saying that our husband is a mirror. So whatever our husband does and says, just trust that it's coming from Hashem. He is there. If we're triggered, the trigger is there in order for us to heal whatever it is that is not healed within us. And it's not only within us. When we heal it within us, we're healing ourselves, we're healing our future generations, we're healing our mothers, our grandmothers, everyone, everything. Because like I always say, with Hashem, there's no past, present, or future. There's no past or future. Everything is in the present moment. The only thing that's real is right now. So when we take the time to look in the mirror, whatever our husband is whatever it's triggering us within our husband or our child, it's happening for me, not to me. So if we look at it from that lens, this gives us a sense of power, and it gives us a sense of how can I grow from this? Thank you, Hashem. My neshama, my soul came to this earth specifically. I chose this husband, I chose these children, I chose this mother-in-law, I chose all of these. My neshama chose these circumstances. On our human level, we don't understand. We're like, why am I suffering so much? But in reality, we came to this world to learn that the suffering, I'm in control of that. I can choose to see things from a different perspective. I can choose to see things from a perspective of love. I can choose to see where's his heart message. What is he really trying to do and say here? Instead of looking at it from the eye of he's out to get me, or he's trying to manipulate me, or whatever it is. Like when we see things from a love perspective, that's like kind of seeing things from the top of the mountain. That's from seeing things from how Hashem sees things, the bigger perspective. And that's when we're able to finally get to that inner peace inside of us. I can't get away with anything anymore. John is her husband. John was driving me to a radio interview recently. He got into the left-hand turn lane, and I said, Why are you turning here? Shouldn't we be going straight? That's right. I was telling him how to drive to a familiar destination in an urgent, do as I say tone. It wasn't pretty, and I was on my way to a show where I would tell other women how to stop controlling their husbands and boyfriends. So as much as we're doing the work, like Laura, she wrote the books. She does the radio shows. She's literally like driving with her husband to a radio show where she's telling other women not to be controlling, and yet she's telling her husband how to drive. We are mere mortal women. We are going to have setbacks. We are going to have moments when we're going to realize this is not who I want to be. We're going to repeat those patterns that we're not proud of, but just noticing, stopping, noticing, and coming back to the teshuva part, like returning to that space that we want to be, the connection, the intimacy. We could always say, I apologize. Teshuva is what is the way of doing teshuva? We apologize. We say, I'm sorry. So the same way we can ask our husband, I apologize for being disrespectful when I told you how to drive. I know I trust you. I trust your driving. So this is how we come back to intimacy. So she's just giving an example how even though she's, supposed to be the teacher, she still failed. And I love that she tells us that, because we're all human beings and it's okay to mess up as long as we are aware of it and we know how to repair. In the old days, John might have snapped at me, accepted my invitation to have an argument, or just sighed heavily and then acquiesced to my demands. But these days, he responds to me differently because it took them time to build that relationship, to build that trust, to build that vulnerability. Sometimes we might say, well, I'm practicing these skills for a week or a month or 3 months. And, why isn't he responding the way that the book says? But it's very important to know that just stay with the work. And there's not when we set a time limit to how he should be responding, we're not in a place of trust, we're in a place of control again. So keep coming back to me. And I am doing the work for me. I'm not doing the work so I can control him with the work. I'm doing the work for me because when I do the work, I am connected to my soul. I'm relinquishing control. I'm connected to Hashem. And I'm doing it for me so I could have inner peace, so I can let go of all that. Because holding on to all those strings and trying the illusion of control, it's very painful and it's very heavy. So I'm not doing it to control him to become this version that I think is, the good version that I could feel okay inside. I'm doing it for me so that I can have inner peace. So it took them time and they built up that relationship. So she says, but these days he responds to me differently, knowing that my standard for myself is to focus on my own responsibilities instead of commenting on how he's handling his. John just looked at me, one eyebrow slightly raised, as if to say, really? I was busted. So the more that we work on these skills, our husbands are kind of going to, like, we'll have that intimacy. And then when we're not, being the woman that we know that we should be, they're kind of going to catch us. And, he'll give you like a look and you're like, you know, it's kind of like a thank you. Thank you for redirecting me to who I really am instead of like my ego taking over. And it's cute how she said I was busted. Like she makes it like a fun and like a playful way, It's stuffy in here, I said. I'm going to roll down the window and let some of the hypocrisy out of the car. Like she made it into a joke. But what's wrong with offering a navigational tip, you might argue? What if my way is faster or better? Shouldn't I be able to say so? Of course, I can say whatever I want. We all can. But there are definite downsides to micromanaging my husband's driving. It's annoying for one thing. So it hurts the intimacy and connection between us. Like you could probably all relate to that. Haven't you driven with somebody who was micromanaging your driving? Do you like that? Do you enjoy it? None of us do. So it just hurts even if I'm driving with a friend and she's micromanaging me, how do I feel? I feel she doesn't trust me. And what does that do? It hurts the intimacy between us. It's not just about between husband and wife. It could be in a relationship to anyone. That's what I love about this work so much. It's not just between my intimacy with my husband. It's my intimacy and that connection and that sense of trust with any person in my life. In addition, there isn't much upside to backseat driving. Going straight instead of turning left and then arriving at the same place at around the same time, it isn't exactly a big payoff. So sometimes, if we really like can't stand it and like we say something, we could always, first of all, we could always repair and apologize. And second of all, um, just it's very important to take the time before we respond to just think like, okay, so I'm gonna say what I have to say. This thing is like standing inside. I'm like, I feel like I have to say that. I have to say it. But just take that moment. We're human beings. Animals, they have a program. A trigger happens and they just respond. We are human beings. Viktor Frankl said between stimulus and response, we have that second to think. How do I want to respond to the situation? That's what sets us apart and gives Hashem gave us that ability to stay in the moment. And as much as we want to fix it or contribute or tell him what to do, or because I know better, I'm smarter than him. Whatever stories that we tell ourselves, and then we kind of create that reality for ourselves. But in that moment, if I'm going to duct tape, I'm going to have my intimacy. If I'm going to blurt out whatever it is, it's going to be a loss of intimacy. What am I going to win? We'll get there 5 minutes earlier. Is that worth losing my intimacy with my husband? So just taking that moment to decide what choice am I going to make? What are my choices in this moment? And what consequence am I willing to deal with? Because all of our choices have consequences. So do I want to have intimacy or do I want to have disconnection? Not saying anything about the way he drives and taking the opportunity to laugh and talk together on the way instead was a huge upside. So that moment passed, duct tape, or apologize, and that's it. And then we could have that connection again. It could be a pleasant drive where we're talking and laughing. Doing that every day for years and years makes our time in the car together sweet and fun. The best self-improvement project. This is page 118. Getting married was the best self-improvement project I've ever undertaken. I can say without a doubt that I'm a better sister, friend, daughter, and coworker now than I was before I started practicing the intimacy skills with my husband. My happy marriage is my greatest accomplishment because in learning to nurture intimacy, I also gained humility, discipline, dignity, respect, self-care, gentleness, and acceptance. So all of these values that literally that's what the Torah teaches us, what the Torah values. This is what we gain from just learning how to relinquish control and working on ourselves. Where those virtues were once a list of words that I didn't fully comprehend, I now enjoy the astonishing benefits of having some degree of each of these qualities, all because I desperately wanted to feel loved and desired. This is our roadmap to feeling loved and desired. Relinquishing control and trust. I trust you, whatever you think, not whatever you want. The want is within us. Whatever you think, I trust you. We trust his decision because Hashem put him in this world. Hashem gave us his masculine. When we trust his masculine, he will stand in his masculine power and he will become that man that we want and desire. But if we're constantly micromanaging him and thinking, I know better, and this is the reality that we're going to create. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a good idea to kind of like write a list. What do I believe about my husband? My husband is da 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 da, and just like noticing what do I believe about my husband, and that kind of gives us an idea. Wow, that's what I keep recreating about him. How can I flip that? If I believe my husband is lazy and not helpful, how can I flip that to my husband is helpful and he's joyous and he's fun to be around? And I know it's uncomfortable, and it's like that's a lie. That's not true. But we look for confirmation when we have a belief. We find the proof for it. We can choose to believe. We can choose to believe the opposite, the life that we actually want to create for ourselves. And I promise you that it works wonders. You can have a beautiful marriage. You don't need to marry a different man to have a successful marriage. You can have a beautiful, different relationship with the same man. You know, sometimes people think, oh, I need to get divorced, and like this guy will never meet my expectations. He'll never be like my friend's husband is this, my friend's husband, whatever. You can marry a different man. You're gonna be in the same situation because it's your beliefs that are creating your experience in your relationship. And that's where our power is. The power is not outside. It's in here. I create my reality. I create my life. The reason being married has been such an effective teacher is that every day I'm faced with my spouse mirror. I get an immediate and accurate reflection of my energy from my husband. When I'm happy and playful, he's typically attentive and affectionate. Ladies, try this. When your husband comes home, just have some music on in the kitchen or wherever you are and just like dance and have a smile on your face and see his reaction to you, see his response to you. It's like, no matter what's going on, this is like homework that I want to give everybody. Just try that. Just put on some music and just dance around and see how he responds to you. When I'm controlling, he's reliably distant and defensive. When I'm vulnerable, he's quick to respond with tenderness and protection. When I'm grateful, he looks for even more ways to delight me. When I treat him respectfully, it engenders oxygen to them. When I'm anxious, he tries to comfort me unless I'm anxious about him or something he's responsible for. Then we're back to distant and defensive. In other words, he's a reliable barometer of my attitude, which I have complete control over. Granted, he's also a separate person who has complete control over his own attitude, and he may have an unpleasant demeanor from time to time. He's only human after all. But when I embarked on this journey, the most shocking part of all was finding out that most of the time, my husband was reflecting back to me what I was bringing to the party. In other words, I recognized that I had a lot of power, much more than I realized. Confusing courage with controlling. Practicing the intimacy skills is a lot like applying the serenity prayer to my marriage. This is a serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This is a good one to write down and actually like just, have it up on the refrigerator. It's a good reminder. Hashem, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Who can argue with the universal truths in this prayer? Well, I did for years before I discovered the intimacy skills. I was pretty unclear on which things I could change and which I couldn't. For example, if we were going out to a party, I figured I had to say what we were wearing. That meant I couldn't criticize John's shirt. That means I could criticize John's shirt or tell him to change his shoes, and I believed I was still squarely in the part where you change the things you can. I figured I was just being courageous, so I couldn't understand the hostile response I was getting from simply trying to help him dress better. Granted, I wanted him to dress my way, but my way was clearly better, right? Is there humility there? Is there, intimacy there? If I'm telling him how to dress, I'm being his mother. I'm coming in and being his mother. What is the relationship going to be like? It's going to be like mother and son. Where's the intimacy there? Who wants to go to bed with their mother? In actuality, my attempts to help John dress better were far from courageous. That was me acting out of an irrational fear. So notice when we're behaving a certain way, what is my fear? What is the fear underneath my behavior? So we always choose faith over fear. So if I'm behaving out of fear, I'm behaving from the ego, from the Yetzer Hara. I'm not behaving from the part of me that is the Tzelem Elokit. So that's a good way to notice. What is the fear underneath, my behavior? So she was saying that she was acting out of an irrational fear that people would think my husband didn't dress well if he didn't wear what I thought he should wear. I was afraid people were going to judge me for how he was dressed. Maybe some people do, but that's not something I can control. So I don't try it anymore. What other people think is none of our business. There's no way for us to know what they're thinking. We can assume what they're thinking. We could try to, a lot of us have the childhood traumas from the different ways to kind of survive is oh my gosh, why am I blanking on this? So when we're children and we're trying to form an attachment with our parents, and they're not really accepting us for our behaviors, and they're telling us to stop behaving certain ways, we kind of go into survival mode. And there's that we have fear responses. A lot of times the fear response is to try to fawn. So fawning means people pleasing, and people pleasing is kind of trying to understand what they're thinking, and trying to be ready for what they're thinking and how they're feeling, and kind of making their feelings okay in order for me to survive. But we're not children anymore. We're adults now. And if we need to work on that part of ourselves, and we know that like we people please, it's a trauma response. And when we bring trauma response to our relationship, it doesn't help us, it doesn't help our husband, it just deteriorates the relationship. So when we act from a place of fear, there's no intimacy there. My husband and I have a mutual agreement to alert each other about unseemly nose hairs, but other than that, I don't see it as my responsibility to make sure he's presentable. Also, she's saying we don't do that anymore. I don't tell him how to dress. He was perfectly capable of dressing himself before I was born, and since I thought he was so attractive when we fell in love, and I still do, he must have been doing just fine with his clothes. Now I rarely say anything about what he wears, except that's a great shirt on you. So if we want to really want to say something about their clothes, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything. If you have something nice to say, give him a compliment. I'm sure he'll appreciate it. That's going to give intimacy. And guess what? He dresses himself very well. We have to keep coming into trust, coming into faith. Here's a metaphor I've come to rely on for deciding if I should comment on something. I ask myself if this is something that's on my paper. So I love this metaphor. We're going to be using it a lot. Now that we are learning about it, this is something that's going to be used. As a kid at school, it was very tempting to look at someone else's paper to see if she was doing the homework right. But ultimately, my grade was a reflection of what was on my paper. And when I turned it in, not hers. I was responsible. I was responsible for and only responsible for my own work. Today, when I ask myself if something is on my paper, I think about everything I'm responsible for and in control of, such as how I dress, what I say. So these are the things that I'm in. This is a good list to write. Sometimes we're like confused what's on my paper, what's on his paper, because we're so enmeshed in our spouses and kids. This is something good to just have, written down or highlighted. This is page 120, the second paragraph. So these are the things that I'm in control. This is what's on my paper: how I dress, what I say, what tone of voice I use, my attitude, which websites I visit, who I talk to, where I go, what I eat, how much I sleep, whether I floss or not, who I'm following on social media. All of that is on my paper. Everything that I don't have direct control over, responsibility for, and choice about is not on my paper, and therefore I don't need to worry about it. We relinquish that control. We give it up to Hashem. That would take energy away from what's on my paper. My version of the serenity prayer is more like a flow chart. God, whose paper is this on? Answer A, which comes up way more than you might think. Not mine. So if there's a situation, ask Hashem, whose paper is this on? And notice it. Is it on my paper? Or B, is it not on my paper, or is it on my paper? Then help me be brave enough to honor my desire about it. If it's on your paper, then you can honor your desire about it. It turns out that my husband's clothes are not anywhere on my paper. That means his choice of attire is something to be respectful for and respectful of and grateful for. After all, I'm not the expert on his life. He is. The same way that I'm an expert on my life, he is an expert on his life. I haven't been dressing a guy for decades, but he has, and I'm not actually a fashionista anyway, so I'm not sure how I got started being so authoritative about his clothes to begin with. One of the unintended consequences of applying my version of the serenity prayer in my marriage has been that whenever I find myself thinking that my husband should change in some way, this is also a good one to highlight, all the way at the bottom of page 120. Whenever I find myself thinking that my husband should change in some way, it's actually a sign that there's something going on with me that I'm not paying attention to. So whenever there's that trigger, that alarm bell, oh my God, what, if only he did, that's when we kind of turn things around. Like when we're pointing a finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at us. So just notice that and give that attention. What's going on for me right now? Whenever I'm obsessing about what's on his paper, what he's written, why it's not right, why I think he should change it, it means my own paper is in some kind of trouble. I'm oblivious to the questions I haven't answered for myself, the blogs I haven't written, and the lessons I'm not taking in or practicing, and therefore the peace and joy on the other side. So the first thing we want to look at if we're triggered and we're, pointing the finger, self-care. How's my self-care? Have I done at least 3 things today that I love, that fulfill me? Number 2, what do I want? Instead of focusing on he's not doing this and he's not doing this, what do I want? What do I want from the situation? So just figuring out what I want is, and then we could tell him, I would love, if you took off your shoes and you put them, actually, no, we don't say you. I would love for the hallway to be neat and clean. You see? I'm still working on it, just the same way that everyone else is here. I catch myself all the time. I'm like, you, his paper. Nope, I don't say you. What do I want? I would like the hallway to be neat. I would like shoes to be on the shoe rack. I would love for everyone's shoes to be on it. I would love for the shoes to be on the shoe rack. So it's all just, play around with it and, figure out the desires, because that helps so much. That helps to clarify things, and it just feels so much lighter in the body just to know, like, that I want something here. What do I want? And exploring that instead of, blaming and shaming and yelling and screaming, because that doesn't really get us anywhere. I also see this with our coaching students all the time. For instance, Jenna was very focused on how her husband's schedule didn't sync with hers and how they didn't get to see each other very often. Okay, here's the problem. Problem is their schedule doesn't sync and she doesn't get to see her husband. Okay, when she was going to bed, he was often staying up late. When she was up and ready to start her day, he needed to keep sleeping. She asked, pleaded, begged, and cajoled him to change his schedule to be more like hers. Okay, where's the control here? What is she trying to do? Her problem is she's trying to, someone you can unmute yourself and just interact with me here. Who would like to figure out what the problem is here? Any takers? Guys?
She's trying to control his schedule.
Right. She's trying to control him, basically, right?
Right.
But what does she want?
She wants to spend time with him, and she's thinking by controlling his schedule, he'll spend time with her.
Thank you. And what's happening here? Is there any intimacy between them? Is her
No,
problem getting resolved?
No, she's just causing resentment. He's going to continue doing the
Right,
same
she's
schedule.
pleading and begging and cajoling him. Sometimes we think if I'm being nice about it, it's still manipulation. You know, people pleasing is still manipulation. Thank you so much. I don't know who you are. I don't see your name. It just says iPhone 7.
Maya.
Hi, Ma.
Maya. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Sure.
that, for your contribution. Um, More like what she thought the schedule of a normal person should be. So the word should is such a toxic word. Even when we do it to us, the word should holds so much judgment. You know, just throw that word out of your vocabulary. But the more she insisted, the more he resisted. She took that as a personal rejection. If he really wanted to spend more time with me, so now she's taking it personally. If he really wanted to, she's not taking responsibility, accountability, that she's expecting things from him and she's controlling him to do what she wants. Not even to do what she wants, she's just trying to control him because she decided that they're not spending enough time together. And if he now she's taking it personally. If he really wanted to spend more time with me, he could do his work earlier and get up earlier, and then would be on a similar schedule. Her plaintive tone told me that Jenna believed her husband really needed to change for her to be happy. How many of us have been there? Right? She seemed confused when I asked her about her self-care. How are you doing with your oil paintings? I asked her, knowing that that was something she enjoyed very much. She was quiet for a moment and then admitted she hadn't painted a thing in months. How's the rest of your self-care? I pressed. The longer we talked, the clearer it became that Jenna's husband's schedule was a clever distraction from her real problem. The inner critic who had moved into her head and was preventing her from painting anything because it wouldn't be good enough. Like sometimes there's an underlying want that we have, and we're so stuck in like perfectionism. Like if it's not perfect, if I don't get the whole thing done, I cannot even start. That's also a trauma response. That's just that we have an inner critic in our head who kind of like it's a program, and we can change that program. You know what? Doesn't have to be perfect. And as long as I start, as long as sometimes just starting, then we get the momentum and then we kind of get into doing things. So this was kind of her thing. She kind of got stuck in that not good enough perfectionism cycle. It's a lot easier to find fault with someone else than to find the courage to face our own fears and faults. There were plenty of interesting things happening on Jenna's paper, but she was missing them. When she put herself on a regular painting regimen, her concerns about her husband's schedule melted away. So sometimes we kind of pick and point the finger on the other because it doesn't we're too afraid. We'd rather be distracted by them and what's not good enough for them, what they're not doing, instead of kind of like focusing on ourselves and like what's really here. What is like the painful spot for me? What do I really need here? When papers collide, everything in your world, your decisions, your responsibilities, your relationships, what you wear and eat, that's on your paper. Everything in your husband's world, his decisions, his responsibilities, his relationships, what he wears and eats, that's on his paper. Know the difference, and your marriage will be a cakewalk. Get them mixed up, and it becomes a forced march. But what about things in the middle? Things you're both responsible for, or that impact you both, like your children, your finances, and the household chores. What if what's on his paper impacts you? How can you know whether to weigh in on the things that you share or keep silent? Tiffany felt she understood the concept of staying on her own paper, but she wanted to know what she should do if her husband's paper overlapped with hers, or if her daughter's paper overlapped with both of theirs. Tiffany had been feeling resentful about picking up. By the way, we could all relate to this example. Tiffany had been feeling resentful about picking up dirty clothes her daughter Anna was throwing on the floor instead of in the hamper. She made a new policy. When her daughter put things in the hamper, she would wash them for her. Anything not in the hamper wouldn't get washed. Her daughter didn't pay much attention to the new policy and continued to leave clothes on the floor. Tiffany was prepared to follow through and let the consequences be what they may. But her husband came in and gathered up all the dirty clothes, even the ones on the floor, and washed them. Tiffany was hurt and angry that her husband was undermining her efforts. She asked him to stop, explaining that she was trying to teach their daughter the consequences of not using the hamper. And her husband was more interested in getting the chores done than worrying about where the dirty clothes belonged. Frustrated, Tiffany wanted to know how she could get her husband to stop washing her daughter's clothes and help Anna understand that actions have consequences. So who's going to be brave enough to, kind of answer this question for me? What does she want over here? What does Tiffany want? Like, what's her happy end result? What does she want?
A clean house.
Right. She wants a clean house. She wants her daughter's clothes to be washed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the control here?
She wants her daughter to put the clothing in the hamper, and she doesn't want her husband.
She kind of
To
want
be-
to train her daughter.
Yeah.
1 second. Let Leah just finish saying, and then Eleonora, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
She wants her daughter to follow the way that she is
Right.
trying to train her.
Mhm.
And she wants everyone to go along with her, including her husband.
Right. So, but what
Even
what
though
she really
he's
wants,
helping.
what she really wants is a clean house and clean clothes, correct?
Right.
But she has an idea of what the role of everyone should be, how it should be played out. So when we do that, what happens? Do we have inner peace or emotional turmoil?
Emotional turmoil.
Yep. Eleonora, what were you saying?
Yeah, like training her and giving her a punishment for not washing it and reinforcing it if she puts it in the hamper by
Right,
washing it. So
but do you think that that's going to
she's
get her
training.
what she wants, like an intimate relationship with her daughter?
Not really. It's just authoritative, I would say.
But what do we really want?
Like a close, trusting relationship where she could be okay with making those mistakes or human errors, I guess.
Right.
Like not be perfect.
So let's see what happens here. I asked Tiffany, thank you so much for contributing. I asked Tiffany to think carefully about just what was on her paper, what she really had control over. She thought for a moment and said, I don't pick up socks from the floor. I only wash what's in the hamper. So she already made that decision. I made the decision that I only wash what's in the hamper. These were her clear limits, which were perfectly on her paper. Her next question was, how can I teach my daughter to use the hamper if my husband keeps indulging her? Now she was back on her husband's and daughter's papers. I asked Tiffany what the benefit would be to her if her husband did stop picking up the clothes off the floor. I would get my daughter to start picking up her clothes. How many times have we tried these things, and how many times have they actually worked with keeping intimacy? It hasn't worked for me. I asked her how it would benefit her if her daughter started picking up her clothes, since she was not planning to pick them up herself. Tiffany thought hard and said, well, her room wouldn't be such a mess all the time. How does it affect you if her room is a mess? I asked. I don't like to see the mess in there. So who is she trying? She's trying to control her daughter, because if my daughter was a neat person, then I could be okay inside. You know, a lot of these fears, especially with like Bukharian women, I think maybe it's with all women. I really shouldn't say Bukharian. Like the way we grew up, like you're a girl, you know, there's a lot of fear under it. Like if my mother comes in and she sees that my daughter there's a fear, like I don't want to be judged, that my daughter is messy. And we kind of, you know, lose that intimacy with our daughter because of our fears about how we're going to look to someone else. So it's a good time to just notice, like, what is my fear underneath what I'm trying to control here? Is it within your control to have her room be tidy? I asked. Well, so far it doesn't seem like it is, she said. I guess you're right. I would love to have it be tidy, but I can't make her clean it, and I don't want to clean it myself. I can always close the door and walk away, she admitted. That might be the best thing. So the same way that we express desires to our husband, we could also express it to our children. And when there's a sense of intimacy, it's much more likely that there's going to be cooperation than when we're trying to control them and shame and punish. It's reasonable to want to have order in your home, and it's reasonable to want to teach your daughter to be tidy. But as much as Tiffany felt that her husband was undermining her effort to mother her daughter, it would have been just as interfering for Tiffany to insist that her husband do things her way. Remember? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Dads have their own way of doing things, and we need to trust them and relinquish control. That if it's not on my paper, it's on her paper, it's on his paper, let them figure it out. After all, dads often do things differently than moms. By staying focused on her own limits, not being willing to pick up dirty clothes from the floor, Tiffany was able to untangle her paper from her husband's and her daughter's papers, two distinctively sovereign individuals, whom she can either accept or reject. So this is our choice every day, all day. We can either accept or reject. Accept intimacy, reject disharmony. So what choice do we want to make? But not control. This also allows them to have their own father-daughter relationship without interference from Tiffany. She could have easily gone down the path of trying to convince everyone that her way was right, that the daughter needed to put clothes in the hamper, but it probably wouldn't have worked. Tiffany would have also created plenty of tension and stress in her home by doing that. Instead, she looked at her own feelings and desires and responded accordingly. Tiffany knew that she could continue to express her pure desire to have a tidy room. By detaching from the outcome, she was choosing harmony and intimacy with her husband over a few dirty socks that she no longer has to pick up. She even took a playful approach by saying to her daughter, "You're so lucky your dad did the laundry, otherwise you'd have to go barefoot today." In a light way, she acknowledged the different policies between her and her husband and let her daughter know she was taking a chance with her socks. And that is the end of chapter 13. I really love this chapter. I just thought it was so really relatable. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording here and then we can discuss.